we've seen it heating up as well, and we saw a second debate yesterday on ITV. We actually got to learn a bit more about what the candidates wanted, as opposed to what Christian Guru Murphy actually thought about the Tory party, as we did for Channel 4's debate on Friday. We learned that the candidate that you're supporting, Liz Truss, according to Rishi Sunak, the former chancellor, is a socialist. Is she?
Well, of course not. And I think the problem is that the Treasury has got the economy wrong. The OBR forecasts expected the deficit for 21-22 to be £106 billion more than it ended up being. And the tax rises, the national insurance rise, was introduced on the basis of things being very, very substantially worse than they were. And we've seen in the next financial year, 22-23, revenues from some taxes already coming in well ahead of expectations. And you were discussing in your previous discussion the question around fuel duty going up when fuel prices go up because of the effect on VAT. So the government is getting more revenue than it anticipated. So within the existing fiscal envelope, it is perfectly possible not to have had the tax rises. Now, I also think we should be very sensible about how we're spending money, which is why I want to see the savings coming from reducing the size of the civil service, £3.5 billion. So you've got to get the fiscal side right, but that doesn't mean higher tax rises, which have been classic Treasury orthodoxy that is almost invariably wrong.
I mean, hold on a minute. You've been in this government for most of this time. Those tax rises are authorised by the Prime Minister, whose job title, by the way, is officially First Lord of the Treasury. It's actually on the plaque at number 10, for goodness sake. If he didn't want there to be tax rises, there wouldn't have been tax rises.
Well, tax policy is made very much by the Chancellor. Bear in mind that other ministers don't get the full details of the budget until it's read out by the Chancellor on budget day.
Does the Prime Minister?
There was a discussion on national insurance. Of course the Prime Minister knows, yes. But the Prime Minister has to have confidence in his Chancellor. You can't swap Chancellors every other week. And once Rishi Sunak had come in, obviously he was the lead figure in tax policy. Ministers didn't know about the increase in corporation tax until it was announced on the floor of the House of Commons.
Yes,
so
but Boris Johnson knew about this. Now, but this is the thing.
Yes.
Does Boris Johnson argue against it? I mean, he's the Prime Minister. Couldn't he have said, no, go away and do it again? Or is he saying, oh, I mean, was Boris Johnson just doing his usual, I don't do detail, I'll let you get on with it and I'll blame you afterwards?
Look, I think we're discussing the past here, really, which isn't particularly helpful.
Well, no, because a lot of this Tory leadership contest is about what happens now.
Well, they were made by the Chancellor. Yes, of course, the Prime Minister didn't overrule the Chancellor, but there's quite a high bar for the Prime Minister overruling Chancellors. We do, after all, have cabinet government, where individual ministers have authority in their own spheres and must take responsibility for that. There would certainly not have been tax rises if the Chancellor hadn't wanted them.
Perhaps there wouldn't have been.
Clear point.
Perhaps there wouldn't. I don't support any of these tax rises. Perhaps there wouldn't have been tax rises if the Prime Minister hadn't overruled Rishi Sunak and forced on more lockdowns than most people thought were necessary. But certainly from my persuasion, I mean. At the end of the day, Boris Johnson wants to keep promising the world to everybody. Someone's going to have to pay for it. Or do you agree with obviously Liz Truss, the idea that actually we're going to have loads of tax cuts and then there'll be growth? Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, who you backed quite happily only a week ago, says that's fairy tale economics.
Well, I opposed these tax rises within government. I thought they were a mistake. And the economics is fundamentally different because the revenues coming in are much higher than forecast. That's the key point. So the affordability of tax decreases is within the existing fiscal envelope because of the growth in revenues and to some extent the expenditure not being exactly as was forecast, unemployment not rising as was anticipated. So there is a certain amount of money that is available, and the tax rises were fundamentally unnecessary because how we pay for the debt in the end, the £400 billion taken on for COVID, is by getting economic growth. And what tax rises are doing at this point is making economic growth less likely and risking a recession, particularly as we have to have and are getting tighter monetary policy to deal with inflation. And the inflationary effects on the public finances are very interesting because if you keep spending under control and do not allow it to rise in real terms or even remain flat in real terms, you're keeping expenditure under control, whilst at the same point your revenues are rising because people are paying tax on inflated wages, but also they're not getting, thanks to the Chancellor, the increase in thresholds because of the effect of fiscal drag. So you've got bearing down on real expenditure, an increase in nominal revenue, means that you have more money available within the Treasury.
OK, there are a lot of people I know listening and watching to this who are just desperate for there to be particularly a cut in fuel duty, something that will make a massive difference to their costs and the cost of everything they buy. Let me also talk about just the candidate personally, Liz Truss. I have to say, I thought she did a stonking job as International Trade Secretary with deals and standing firm as Foreign Secretary dealing with Russia on Ukraine. But there's no doubt at all she's done some fairly wooden performances in these debates, better perhaps last night than on Friday. And she came, you know, frankly, rather embarrassing third to Penny Mordaunt, a far more junior minister in the second round. There's all this talk about that Kemi Badenoch should basically fall away and pledge her support to Liz Truss to not split this so-called right vote, or as many are seeing it as an anti-Rishi Sunak vote. Why do you think that it's Liz Truss who should go forward rather than Penny Mordaunt or indeed Kemi Badenoch?
Well, look, I think the party has a number of excellent candidates putting their names forward. Liz Truss, as you pointed out, has the experience. She has held one of the most important government jobs as Foreign Secretary at a time of international crisis, which she has handled exceptionally well, and long, obviously, with the Prime Minister, who got the big decision right on Russia, on Ukraine, and led the free world in response to Russia. That's been fundamentally important. But I think that she has the right prescripts for the Conservative Party for taking us forward, the right policies on Europe, the right policies for the economy. And so although Kemi has had an excellent campaign, I don't think she is the right person to lead the party at this point.
Isn't the reality is that you and Nadine Dorries, you both came out in outside number 10 and endorsed Liz Truss as the candidate you wanted to take over. You blame particularly Rishi Sunak for Boris Johnson's downfall. Well,
I think that loyalty is an important quality, and that it is sensible for people to support the Prime Minister who has appointed them. But also, we have been following Rishi's economic policies. I don't understand what he's complaining about. And yesterday he was saying that he wanted to go further and faster on the European issue and get the benefits of Brexit. But I've got this letter from the 23rd of June, so when he was still Chancellor, which has already, I'm sorry to say, been leaked, which says absolutely clearly that, let me read it to you, I therefore ask that we make clear from the outset that the retained European Union law bill and the proposed normalisation and sunset will not apply to tax. So we've got somebody who, when he was still in office, was not willing to give the benefits that he now thinks are so important. And he makes a great charge about integrity. I think it's all extraordinary.
Just finally, who are the final two candidates that are going to go to Tory party members by the end of this week?
I'm not a political commentator. I don't think it's for me to guess on election results. Let's wait and see.